Today, I'm going to show you guys what I think are the top 10 best stance cars in GTA 5 in 2023. Some of these cars you probably have seen before, others you likely haven't, but I've done my best to pick out a bunch of really cool, clean, unique, and modifiable cars to showcase. I'm going to show you guys each car in detail along with the modifications offered by each as well as how to stance them, so that way you're well equipped to decide on what cars you'd like to add to your collection. Now before I do get into these cars, I will say that this list is very heavily opinionated, and I know that everybody has different tastes when it comes to picking out a car to stance, but I have tried to mitigate this by diversifying the cars that I picked as much as possible. In addition to that, this list is totally unranked. Now, in addition to that, there will be some cars that I showcase in this video that will need to be stanced manually, basically requiring you to use a weapon to forcefully break the car's suspension. So for these cars, you cannot equip bulletproof tires as they do alter the wheel's hitbox and will prevent you from being able to stance them, so just keep that in mind. Anyways, with all that logistical stuff out of the way, let's take a look at these cars. Alright boys, kicking off this list here, we've got the Benefactor Schlagen GT. Kicking this list off with a really beautiful exotic car. Luckily, it's not too expensive in the grand scheme of things here in GTA 5, and obviously for that price tag, you do get a decent number of modifications scattered all over the place. You can really kind of refine this car. You can smooth out a lot of the body, make it look super clean, throw on a really nice paint scheme, and you'll be set to go. Lots of different opportunities for a build here, and obviously you can get the car pretty low in the mod shop as well, as you guys can see. And then after you lower it there, you can go ahead and stance it as well, which is nice. And this thing just gets so low to the ground, but despite being so low, the fitment's actually pretty good. As you guys can see here, it does tuck quite a bit of rim, but still looks refined, still looks clean, doesn't look awkward in any way. It sits super pretty with the right build, so highly recommend checking out the Schlagen GT as a stance car for sure. This thing is so pretty. Next up here, we've got the Cheval Picador, another very unique choice for a stance car in my opinion, because it's a muscle car, but luckily enough, we actually got some more customization with this car just about a year ago with the Criminal Enterprises DLC. Now, unfortunately, Rockstar removed this car for purchase. Seems kind of stupid in my opinion, but you can still find this thing off the street and have it decently modified for very cheap. In addition to that, as you guys can see, you can absolutely slam it in the mod shop, and then when you take it outside, you can obviously stance it after the fact as well. This car looks so low to the ground, it looks like it's on bags or something. It's tucking like half the rim, which is honestly crazy, but despite that, I still think it looks really clean. Again, there's no clipping or anything like that, so it doesn't really look that bad. It's like practically touching the ground, which in my opinion looks super cool. Very unique take on a stance build, definitely worth checking out. And next up, we've got the Declasse Impaler, yet another unique muscle car that I figured I'd throw on this list because I really haven't seen this car being used a lot as a stance car. Luckily enough, this car is pretty reasonably priced, and in addition to that, even not considering the Arena War upgrade, there's still a decent number of modifications for the OG version of the Impaler, as you guys can see here. Lots of different options all over the car for the bumpers and all that, and obviously some cool liveries as well, so you can kind of throw whatever style you want at this build and it'll look super clean afterwards. In addition to that, you can get it pretty low in the mod shop, and afterwards when you slam it, this thing gets so much lower to the ground. Although the wheels are kind of sunken in when the car is stanced, and even in stock form the wheel offset is a little off, but still this thing looks super clean. Again, the wheels don't clip, so it doesn't look super awkward, and you guys can see here it is slammed to the floor. It looks super clean in my opinion. Throw on a nice paint scheme and stance it up and you'll be set to go. Next up here, we've got the Dubauchi JB700W, one of my personal favorite kind of unsung heroes of GTA 5. This is a weaponized vehicle, so you have to pay up for it, but in exchange for that, you get a really refined looking old Aston Martin DB5. Unfortunately, there are no aesthetic modifications besides being able to add or remove the machine guns to the car, which is nice actually, because you can remove them compared to the original JB700, but you can also get this thing super low in the mod shop, and then as you guys can see here, when you stance the car, it gets so much lower to the ground. Again, nice tuck, not super crazy. The wheels aren't clipping, which is nice, and the wheels actually fill the fenders quite nicely as well, as you guys can see here, with a nice clean paint scheme, keeping the outside of the car very simple with some nice wheels. This thing looks super clean, definitely worth giving a shot. Next up here, we've got the OG JB700, kind of as an alternative to the JB700W. Now, unfortunately, the JB700 in its stock form has 0 modifications, and the machine guns are set. You can't remove those, which kind of sucks. In addition to that, this is a removed website car, so maybe just spring ahead and just pay the extra money for the JB700W, but if you have access to the OG JB700, as you guys can see here, you can make it look pretty clean as well. The machine guns being on the front fenders there is kind of annoying, but on the whole, this car is still super clean, and if you have access to one, definitely go stance it. Next up here, we've got the Dinka Conjo SJ. I featured this car in my best JDM cars video, but in actuality, this car is just so great all around. It's got so many different modifications, and in addition to that, so many different opportunities for builds. Now, the car is very expensive, but in exchange for that, you're getting one of the most modifiable cars in the game. In addition to that, this car obviously has a pretty big cult following, given that it's based off of an EG Civic, which is really cool. In addition to all of that, you can absolutely slam this car in the mod shop, and the other great thing about this car is that it actually can be stanced via the interaction menu. So as you guys can see here, you pull up the interaction menu, you can lower the stance right in there too. So you have a lot of different options for adjusting the height of this car to get the stance that you want, and it's super easy to do it. You don't have to use a weapon either, which is nice. And as you guys can see here, the final product looks so clean. So once again, lots of different styles you can throw at this car, lots of different paint schemes, liveries, wheels, all that stuff, and it looks so clean. And of course, next up, we've got the Ballista Conjo as the another kind of alternate to the Dinka Conjo SJ. This car is obviously a lot more reasonably priced, and when it comes to performance, also the Ballista Conjo, I think, is a bit more balanced, being in the compacts class rather than the coupes class. Now, obviously, in exchange for that, you do lose some modifications compared to the Conjo SJ, but still, there's a ton of options to kit out the exterior of this car, which is great. In addition to that, you can absolutely slam this thing in the mod shop. You could throw some ridiculous camber at it, but in my opinion, that's kind of unnecessary. The other thing about this car is that you can't stance it with a weapon or through the interaction menu, but in my opinion, as you guys can see here, it doesn't need it. It looks so good. Next up here, we've got the Emperor Vector, yet another car that I featured in my best JDM cars video. This car overall is just a jack of all trades, man. Although it is pretty expensive, you get in exchange for that a really well modifiable car that's in the top 10 for the most customizable cars in the game, actually. In addition to that, it's great for drifting, it's great for track performance and all that stuff. Plus, you can do a nice clean stance build, as you guys can see here. This car gets so low to the ground. Just in the mod shop, you can throw a little bit of camber at it, which looks great. In addition to that, it has over fender options as well, which look pretty clean, which is awesome. And obviously outside of that, because it's an LS Tuner's car, you could stance it via the interaction menu. So definitely an overall very clean build that's very easy to get the fitment that you want. And there's obviously a lot of modifications that you can choose to kind of kit this car out however you like. And this is my build. I love this car, and I'm always going to love it, especially for a nice stance build for sure. And next up here, we've got the Karen Sultan Classic. This is a car I really haven't taken a look at in a while, but I was actually kind of happy to take this car back out and stance it up for this video. Obviously, this car is super expensive, but in exchange for that, you get a pretty well modifiable four-door sedan. Obviously, this is based off of the Impreza GC8, which is nice. Lots of different customizations scattered all over the place, especially with some really cool liveries, in my opinion. Lots of cool, like, hot boy liveries, which is great. In addition to that, as you guys can see here, you can get this thing looking super low just with the normal suspension upgrades in the mod shop. But an added bonus with this car is that despite the fact that this car is so new, you can still stance it with a weapon. And as you guys can see here, you can lower it down with a weapon. It lowers twice. You don't need to do anything fancy to stance it down, and it gets super low. But as you guys will see here, actually, the wheels fill the fenders very nicely. Obviously, the wheels are kind of sunken in. Not the perfect fitment, but still, considering all the upgrades for this car and the way that it looks, it is super clean. And of course, I could not forego featuring the Karen Sultan RS Classic as well. Now, this is kind of one of those things where you gotta kind of pick your poison. You'll get fewer modifications with the OG Karen Sultan Classic, but in exchange for that, you get the four-door body style, which I really do like, and it is pretty unique. Alternatively, you get the Sultan RS Classic. It's the two-door. It's got pretty much the exact same mods. In addition to that, it's got some interior and engine customization too. And obviously, with this car being an LS Tuner's car, it's a bit easier to get it lowered through the mod shop, and then outside of the mod shop you can stance it up in the interaction menu. So kind of pick whichever car you want, whichever body style you like better. It's honestly kind of hard to pick between the two cars because they both look so good when they're stanced, but still the RS Classic here looks super clean as like a 22B style build. Even with those wide body fenders, the wheels fill them so nicely. So yeah, definitely another must-have stance car. Next up here, we've got the Maibatsu Penumbra FF, another pretty underrated JDM car that I really hadn't shown much love in a while, but again, like the Karen Sultan Classic, I was very happy to pull this car back out to make this video. Now, despite not being a tuner's DLC car or anything like that, this car still offers quite a lot in terms of modifications all over the place. And the best thing about this car, in my opinion, is the fact that the stock body on this car looks so good. It has nice flowing lines, the bumpers don't look awkward, it sits very nicely. In addition to that, you can lower it using the suspension mods in the mod shop and you'll be set to go. No stancing necessary, and this thing, as you guys can see, looks super clean. Next up here, we've got a very OG stance card that people have been using for years, and I didn't want to ignore it, the Ubermax Sentinel XS. Thank God you can still purchase this car, which is great. But yeah, obviously with this car, there was actually a lot of recent customization added to it with the Criminal Enterprises DLC, which is awesome. So lots of additional bumper upgrades, interior upgrades as well, in addition to some really nice liveries that really complement the look of this car great. I'm a little bit biased to this car because it is based mainly off of an E92 BMW, and I think those cars are so beautiful. Now, obviously in GTA 5 here, you can throw some suspension mods at it. You can actually get this car slightly lower as well if you throw on the HSW suspension, if you've got the upgrade equipped. And obviously, as you guys can see, you can also stance it with a weapon manually. So lots of different options to get this car sitting the way you want. And I think the final product looks so freaking good. I mean, look at the way those fenders are kind of being filled up by the wheels. It looks so clean. Next up here, we've got, again, another alternate to the Sentinel XS, the OG Sentinel as well. Now, unfortunately, this car was a removed website car, so you cannot access or purchase this car anymore. In addition to that, it's a pretty rare spawn on the street, but despite that, if you're able to get this car into a mod shop and throw some mods at it, you can get it looking super clean and sitting pretty low to the ground. This car doesn't have as much in terms of suspension upgrades because it doesn't have the HSW upgrades, so you can't get it slightly lower to the ground. But again, even with just the base suspension upgrades and stancing it manually with a weapon, as you guys can see here, this thing looks super clean. And again, if you want a convertible, I know convertibles are kind of hard to come by in the modern GTA economy, but yeah, this convertible, it's underrated, it's rare, it's old, but still looks super clean and sits very nicely in my opinion. Next up here, we've got the Volker Fagaloa, the very last entry on this list. I didn't want to ignore this one. I know a lot of people have shown this car some love when it comes to stancing it, and that's just because this car is so cool, man. There's a lot of different, very unique and authentic modifications for this car. Lots of cool liveries. You can do the wood paneling like I did. You can throw a surfboard on the roof. There's plenty of options to kind of kit this car out however you want, while still retaining that overall classic style. You can get it pretty low in the mod shop, but not super low, but really where that stance comes in is you stancing it manually via a weapon. And as you guys can see here, once you slam it with your gun, it gets super low to the ground. The rims are tucking very hard into those fenders, but again, the car still looks super good. So you can throw on a nice set of clean chrome wheels, and this thing looks super clean. It's dropped to the floor. Definitely a very unique and classy stance build that I highly recommend you check out. And that is a wrap for what I think are the best stance cars in GTA 5 Online in 2023. So hopefully you guys enjoyed my picks and learned about some really cool and unique stance cars that you've likely never seen before. If you guys did find this video helpful and you want to see more like it, feel free to drop a like here, leave any feedback down below in the comments, and also consider subscribing to my channel as well. Thank you guys all so much for watching, and I hope you have an awesome day.